Hi there, and welcome to another episode of TPI Talks Crew Call. Once again, we have Jacob calling in from Liverpool.
Oh, yeah.
And this time we have two of the members of the Halsey audio crew. Guys, would you just like to quickly introduce yourselves to the folks at home?
Yeah, my name's Simon Thomas. I'm the front of house engineer for Halsey. Been with her now for a couple of years, and here we are.
Hi, I'm Benny. I'm the system engineer for the last couple of runs with Simon and the Halsey crew, and I've been working with Simon for a little while now and been designing the systems.
So before we go into your two's relationship and the Halsey show, how's lockdown been? I mean, let's start. Where are you both? Benny, how about we start with you? Where are you located at the moment?
I've almost been stranded a little bit. I'm currently in the UK. I spent a lot of time in the US and through Australia doing gigs, and lockdown happened very quickly. Pretty much a few days after that tour, the last Europe tour we did in Manchester, and since then I've just been staying in the UK with my girlfriend and trying to write it all out, seeing what's happening, because New Zealand's very far away and various forms of lockdown and isolations. It makes it a bit difficult to travel, and no point in unnecessarily travel, so it's been locking down really.
Yeah, well, obviously since lockdown was, we heard it was coming. That was at the back end of the tour with Halsey, and basically after we saw you, Stuart, actually, when we at Manchester Arena. So since then, luckily we were in the UK for me, which meant I could get home. And obviously since I've been at home, pretty much really the same as sort of Benny, just trying to see this through, trying to keep in touch with everybody, networking, doing the social media thing. I think that's important to keep doing all those things, and kind of turning my hand to other things like building houses. But there you go, just trying to get on top of what's going on. And to be honest, I'm at the point now where I'm really looking forward, and I think we need to be positive. It is going to start again, and I think now's the time to be thinking hard about how it's going to start again. So that's what I've been doing.
So it must be quite an alien experience for both of you, having been on the road for such a long time. Is this sort of like the most time you've had on your hands since you began touring?
Easily for me, yeah. I realised it's the first time in like 10 years I haven't touched a road case. It's things like that, and I know Simon as well. It's a long time.
Well, there's a little difference there. I haven't touched a road case for 10 years. Yeah, I've got white gloves, as they keep telling me. Well, that's not true, but I had to put a little joke in there because the older guy on the tour, I get, generally the mickey taken out of me. Yeah, so, I mean, I would say, I've had times in my career where I've, had 6 months off, sometimes, being a front of house audio engineer, there are times in your career, especially when it's building, that there are times when you have long lengths of time off. And I have had 6 months off before, but obviously this is getting to be rather extreme, and normally with that time off you're able to do things, you're able to kind of get involved in things and maybe keep your skills brushed up, because you can go and talk to the manufacturers or go and try consoles out, and do all those sorts of things. But this lockdown is, all we can really do is talk, keep in touch with each other, unless we're lucky enough that we've got the space or we have a big studio, or we're involved in a big studio setup. But really, for people in audio, it's pretty, most of us, I think it's kind of flatlined.
I mean, we were talking off camera before about the various, incentives that are going on, from live streaming and, one or two of the socially distant shows, especially in the UK. Have either of you looked into that or looked at being involved in one way, shape or form?
Conversations. In fact, I was having conversations only last night with some people about this, and it looks like there is now, especially in the US, I think there's some traction now at trying to do kind of like what they call virtual shows, and trying to get the crews who are involved with a particular artist, they can be in one part of the world, you can be in the other part of the world, equipment being provided, and just kind of linking it all up through networking and stuff like that. I mean, it's got to be made to work, obviously, in its early days, but Benny and I kind of talked about this before, hadn't we? When we were on the tour, when all this lockdown started, we were saying, if only we could do this, if only I could mix from my home studio. But it looks like, it's going to take big organisations to make that happen, and I think it will happen. And I think it might be, become part of what we do in the future. I think technology has been pushed forward. It was always there, but it was always on the back burner, and everybody's saying, well, we can make this work, but it's going to cost a lot of money. But the truth is, now they've been forced to spend the money to make this happen. So, I think long term, I think there's going to be a lot of positive things come out of this. Short term, obviously it's tough, but long term, I think we'll see more of these virtual shows, and I think we'll see more of these, as you say, the pod shows and various things like that. At the moment, it's about how to finance them and how to make them work financially. But I guess if you do the virtual kind of thing, which is, for example, TV, YouTube or whatever, those sorts of things, it's possible, I guess, if they get the licensing right to make it work and make money for everybody.
Mm. It's interesting as well, because I was speaking to some of the chaps behind the Wacken live stream they did a couple of weeks ago now, and that audio mix was being mastered from New York, but the show was happening in in Germany, and it's just kind of showing that kind of the level you can go to, and if we move it forward, it could be a greener way of touring, I suppose, in one way or another as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and also maybe the way forward is, instead of us traveling around the world with loads and loads of equipment, is we get it bought in, we get it installed, the show, and it becomes more of a show like the way they do the West End and Broadway. I mean, possibly that's could be part of a model as well. I mean, I think we need to look at this, and I think we need to look at this more broadly than I think possibly we have done all in the past. And I'm sure there's people that have been thinking about this, just like me, for years of the ways to do it. But as I say, it takes people with large resources to make these things happen. Absolutely.
Cool. So the reason we kind of brought you in today, I say brought you in, virtually brought you in today, it's a chat we had when we were on site, actually, and it was about the working relationship between a front of house engineer and a system designer. From the TPI standpoint, whenever we used to go to a show and we were speaking to the various departments, our first port of call with audio would have been someone like yourself, Simon, who would have been a front of house engineer to talk through everything audio. But over the years, it seems more and more that many engineers like yourself are very much bringing people like Benny into the conversation. And it seems, again, from the outside, that it's a much closer relationship than perhaps it was a couple of years ago to build up a sound system. So just before we go into the depths of that, had you two worked together before the last tour? Like, when did you first start working together?
I think I'll let Benny start that one.
Yeah, it was like, I actually had to research. I was like, I'm not sure. It was April 2018, we first met. I was sort of helping out with the PA in Australia for Australia League and Halsey Tour. And then after that, I got a call, can you sort of look after both ends of the multi-core for the South America run in June? And ever since then, it's kind of been how it is. We got on well, and everything seemed to work, and the rest is history, I suppose.
It was definitely that tour. I remember that one very well, and I think what was a good starting point was I turned up to the show that Benny was involved in, and someone had decided to put some infills in a very strange place, and it was like, ooh, I don't know, ooh, and Benny went, leave that one with me. I'll fix that. And literally just went, got hold of them, picked them up, threw them on the floor, arranged the cases, put them back up. I went, it wasn't difficult, was it? And I think that was the kind of start of our relationship, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then we ended up in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and it was kind of like the first gig working with you and Brian at the time. It was like, oh, if we can get through the South America tour, we can get through about anything. Local PAs and local control and
red wine.
Yes.
And I suppose you've told Stu this before when you met him, but how do you kind of both approach a show when you enter rehearsal and build up your respective setups? Is there a blueprint, or is it on a case-by-case basis?
it's kind of a bit of both, in all honesty. I mean, there has to be some sort of general blueprint anyway for what we do. But yeah, I mean, but then after that, it's case by case, and for me, I'll talk about it from a sort of the desk perspective. I mean, I'll go away and I'll look at the band, and we'll go into rehearsals early. And obviously there's no consoles there initially with the initial parts of rehearsal. There's probably a monitor desk, and obviously we'll work closely with the MD about obviously we're starting with the basics. What instruments are we using? How do we want to achieve this? Halsey's a really, really good example of diversity, because we've got there's a whole lot of electronic elements, but there's a lot of live elements to it as well. A lot of live drums, but also a lot of electronic drums. Live guitars and keyboards, and so it's very, very interesting with triggers. So that's where we start with, obviously, something like that. Obviously we build up an input list, and then from there I'll go away and I'll make the initial template, create the show file. It's just a canvas, it's just a blank canvas, and that's where I'll start look at the outboard equipment. How do I want to process a vocal? How does she sing? What's the best way to approach this? The right microphone. So there's a lot of work to be done even before we go into into a rehearsal studio. And then Benny and I, that he can talk about the systems bit in a minute, but we'll have these conversations about how do we think we can make the rehearsals work with what we've got, because obviously once we've got that working, we need to adapt that to the live environment. And then obviously we need to look at the shows and the systems design, and obviously that's a very important thing for me, to be able to work with someone who has an ear, who has an understanding of actually, not just looking at a screen, but also has an idea of how I do things. And I'm not the most orthodox of mixers, but there are kind of paths that I do go down, and once you get what I'm doing, it all makes a lot of sense and it's all quite logical. But Benny can probably jump in on that and from his angle.
Yeah, it's sort of as you said, Simon, like deciding on your sort of the outboard and your microphone and everything. Designing the PA is similar, because it's like the genre is so specific, and where you want that PA to sit in the genre and how you need it to react, and also getting to know your engineer. We may touch on this again later, but when you get to know sort of the front house engineer, you understand the way they mix and the way they do things, and they have an overall sound that they want, like a vibe, and then designing the PA comes around that vibe and how you need it all to work. And then during the show, things happen. You can do things to sort of work together and sort of master it as such. But also for rehearsals, I remember for that the Halsey rehearsals, we were there with the show designers, and they were talking about the placement of the band and things, and sort of they're talking about putting the band in interesting places, and it's like, oh, we've got to cover these people down the front. We can't have the PA on the band. So that's a Simon and I meeting in the middle of Simon going, how can we do this so it's still good? And us talking to the designer, so it's a three-way thing, and to make it all sort of iron out any problems before they begin.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I think you have to be. I think the point is you have to be firm but fair, and at the end of the day, most of these show designers are actually very accommodating as long as you take the right approach to them. I mean, if you take the wrong approach, then that's, I think, when you end up in sticky situations. But touch wood with our guys, and obviously talking just specifically about this Halsey tour was very constructive. The way we got where we needed to go is the point.
And they took us into consideration as well. Like James from Moment Factory, he sort of initiated the meeting, speaking to Simon, front house engineer, Rick, monitors, and then I was there as well, sort of figuring out, well, where's the PA going to be? Where's the, we can do flow and side fill for monitors. Like, it's all these kind of things that it's good to be involved in the design of. And I think these things are becoming more important with these, as these shows get more and more extreme. that PA design is actually part of the set.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, probably should say for people at home who maybe didn't see the show, like this wasn't a convention. There was like, you know, all these automated elements, and she as a singer as well was obviously kind of flying up quite high, and that must have affected you in terms of, you know, potential feedback issues. And
yeah, I mean, it was, I've got to say, I mean, you know, that show, we put it in extremes of venues and we proved we could do it. And I got to say, I don't think from an audio perspective, we had a bad show, did we, Benny?
No.
There was the, you know, obviously there's the odd one where, you know, it's like you wrestle with a few things, but we didn't have, you know, there was no one went away unhappy. In fact, majority, you know, we were getting lots of praise, people coming up to the barrier and saying, thanks. And we're like, thanks for what? They said, thanks. It's great to come to a show that's so diverse, dynamic, interesting. The sound was great, the lights were great, the video was great. And I do think you've got to give that to Halsey and her team. They do put on a good show, and you know, it's definitely the most diverse kind of show I've done in many years, I've got to say. You'd probably agree, Benny.
Totally. And coming back to the venue thing with the designing of the PA, I think when we first talked about this particular tour, some of the venues were booked, but we weren't quite sure. And as we got more into it, we're sort of seeing the vast range of venues. We're talking like pretty small, like bigger side of clubs to the O2, and also being sort of a Europe tour and going these small venues, truck spaces, I think, as well. So the venue size being the amount of boxes, rigging points, weight for the actual PA, and then also truck space is two major considerations.
Yeah,
on top of the sound of it.
You know, I think I'm a very flexible engineer. I mean, we both sat down and went, oh, let's lose speakers. And initially people were looking at us going, sound engineer losing speakers, what's going on here? And but we did, because we know that most of these modern systems are incredibly efficient. And to be honest, sometimes less is more. There's certainly going down the acoustics route was the best solution for this particular tour, because of the diversity of the system, from large format boxes to small format boxes, and we were able to mix and match, and that's why it worked so well.
We had the whole range.
Yeah, we did, but we still got it all in the trucks.
Talking just even outside the kind of Halsey tour for a second for you, Simon, are you finding just in your process you are bringing in system engineers earlier on in the process than perhaps you would have, like, you know, a decade ago, for instance?
I would say so, but you know, I think this kind of really all started for me personally way further back than that. In my days when I was a flashlight tech at Britannia Row back in the 90s, I used to work for a very dear friend of mine called Ray Furs, front house engineer. And he had a saying, he says, I may mix the show, but you engineer it. And since that day, I've always felt like I always did my best as a systems engineer, and I always felt that at some point, particularly then, they were, I wouldn't say undervalued, but it wasn't seen in the same light. But that was the turning point. And then obviously in the last sort of 10 years, it's become important to have systems engineers, because it's a whole other science in there. I mean, there's a lot of software involved, and as much as I know enough to be dangerous with it, it's always better to have someone that is dangerous. So it's always important to make use of those systems guys. And yes, obviously, getting back to the point, yes, I think over the last 10 years, yes, for sure, there's been more and more use of systems engineering, and rightly so, because we need to make sure that we are getting the best coverage in the venues, because an audience comes, and I think they should get their value for money, whatever seat they sit in. Obviously, I can be a systems guy as well, because that's my background, but it's got to be a team effort, because it doesn't work otherwise. You can't be mixing the show and trying to be the systems guy. It's just not the way to do it, especially with all this modern technology we have out there.
And Benny, are you finding you're working sort of more closely with front of house engineers than ever before?
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started doing systems, I was in New Zealand and working for a PA company that would provide PAs for touring bands that were coming through, because people obviously don't fly over or ship over containers of PA for 1 or 2 shows. So that is sort of when I first started, and I was sort of what I would consider like a utilitarian system tech. You kind of do the prediction that you know is right for the venue, and just be there to help out the engineer, do what you can. Often, obviously, looking after their console that they've rented from you as well. And as I've moved into more like larger tours with Simon and a few other bands, it's when I've started to sort of sit in and you get to know the engineer and you get to understand, like I said before, the sound they're after, the vibe. And that's when you can really make the show really good, in my opinion, because as Simon said, like he's mixing it and his mind is in the creative side. The last thing he's thinking about is changing the time on the subs because the audience has moved in and that relation's changed or the humidity's changed. And also, like, he can't walk around and have a listen. It's like we've done our best during the day to tune the front fill and make sure it's all right. But unless you get your ear down there and listen, you never really know. So it allows me to sort of alter the shape of the PA, as Simon and I like to call it. We've tuned it with an empty room and then maximizing that impact. So it's almost like mastering, Simon's mix into the PA and then adjusting filters and EQ to make it really sit in. And also, especially with another artist I work for, they're an EDM artist. We do a lot of like bass heavy shows, and there's often quite big dB limits, especially when it's DBC for the low end. As sort of talking with not only the engineer but the band as well, and seeing what their vibe is and what they want, and you're getting a report back, oh, it's too loud in the subs, turn it down. It's like, well, what frequency is it? And adjusting frequencies, because an engineer's in the mix, they're like, oh god, I'll just turn it down. It's like, well, no, you don't have to. You don't change a thing. I'll deal with it. I'll sculpt the frequencies, or I'll change the time of the PA to, move the lobes or whatever. And that's when we can really maximize the systems.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, Manny. You're going back a little bit what you're saying, Stuart. Why do I work with Benny? Because not all systems guys have that approach. Of I'm going to deal with the problem and deal with the frequency of the problem. They just sometimes, well, I'll just turn it down. Well, that's not always the solution, because it's not actually always, doesn't always solve the problem either. You can turn it down sometimes 5 dB and it still doesn't solve the problem because there's a frequency issue. So, working with good systems guys is really, really important these days. And, and I say there are a lot of great systems guys out there, don't get me wrong, but it's not just about that. You've got to have a relationship with that person to be able for them to understand what you're trying to achieve.
And I find it helps as well going to festivals, because obviously if there's already a PA in, there's a festival system tech who's done put in a massive PA, done a great job, sounds good. But then Simon and I would come in and it's like, I know what Simon wants and needs of the sound of the PA. So I almost liaise between Simon and the system tech. And often I'll get there before Simon, if it's an overnight or if it's like they're traveling or whatever, then I can come in and maximize their system to us. And you can't expect the festival system tech to sort of know what we want. So it's that thing where it's like they've almost given us a blank canvas, and then I've we've sort of sculpted out what we need, and then Simon comes in and it all comes together.
Hopefully.
And Benny, it's a big question, but in terms of the technology that system techs are using now, I mean, every other show I go to, there seems to be a more and more complicated, almost like iPad setup with various kind of like crazy algorithms are going on in the background, and to be honest, it kind of makes my brain explode because I can only follow so far. But like, from your side, what's it like in terms of being on that kind of side of the industry? And it seems to be one that's just developing more and more and more. It's
a really, really cool thing to be involved in. All the manufacturers are obviously competing against each other to have the newest bit of tech, and D&B have their array processing, and then they go to Soundscape, and their acoustics have their thing with the M1, and yeah, it's all sorts of tech. And in the end, it's all about providing the end user the best experience. What is interesting, I've noticed, is a lot of sort of time, energy, and money is being put into building smaller speakers, which is really cool. Obviously, there's always going to be a large format ones for those massive festivals. You need the big boxes, but the smaller speakers, which is good, because I think that gone are the days of a massive turbo sound system, turning it up as loud as it possibly go and having those guitar solos literally ripping your ears off. Now it's more of an art. It's more of like a sonic landscape, and that's what PA manufacturers and us as sound guys are trying to do. So it's a really good time. We've almost been finally given all the canvases we could possibly need to create the art that is going on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Benny. I think this is I think we've been through various revolutions in this industry, and we had the pinnacle of analog, which was your XL4 and your DMB C4 rig, and probably your turbo sound flashlight. And that's the thing. Oh, look at this, is great, it's amazing. We can do this, we can do that. And then I think it took a dive for the worse for a long time after that. I mean, early digital audio and consoles were just appalling. And, it's taken time. And I think, I would say in the last 5 years, we turned a corner in the quality of digital audio. And, people will probably string me up for this, but I would argue that there are now digital consoles out there. I would argue that you can bring your biggest analog setup in the world and you can get me to operate both. And I think it'd be very difficult to tell which one's better. I'm not saying I think there might be an experience that's different, but will they both sound good? Yes, they will. I'll argue that now. Whereas 5 years ago, I would have said, no, I'm still going to stay with the analog.
Yeah.
I think you can mix and match it now so well. Like as Benny said, the systems are great. There's great small format boxes. We now have some amazing digital consoles, but we still have some amazing analog stuff as well. And now they fit together so well. I think that actually, when you do turn the knobs and things like that, there is a difference, and you really hear those changes. Whereas before, it's like, oh, well, I don't really hear any difference, and maybe that was just me.
Yeah, and also noise limits. I've done quite a bit of work in Australia with doing festivals and stuff there, and there's big emphasis on noise limits for almost all those gigs. So that's also why sort of PAs are getting smaller but better at the same time, because you can't have these gigs at 105 at front of house anymore. It shouldn't be. There's not really any need for it to be that loud.
Right.
But having them smaller and working more on the science to get a more even sound, rather than just having it super loud at the front and just blasting to the back of the field, room, arena, whatever.
I mean, I suppose as well, for Simon and your workflow, when you're talking about digital, if you're talking about, a recalc software, for instance, is also digital, it makes sense to just keep on that kind of platform as well, right? Rather than, having an analog desk, then speaking to a digital, ray processing. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, we made, Ben and I spent a lot of time thinking about how to keep as much stuff in the digital domain as possible, and and where we convert stuff, the analog stuff, we use the highest quality converters, and that really does make a difference, and that is really important. There's no point in having a digital console and then just plugging a piece of outboard in and not thinking it through and going, oh, well, I've got latency, it doesn't sound right, what's going on? We spent a lot of time working out how to convert those analog things into the console. But there's quite a lot of other stuff in our rack which is just for the purpose of converting, but we still kept it as simple as possible. So yeah, it is important. Getting back to your point, Stuart, yes, it is about trying to keep things as much in one domain as possible, or if you convert it, you only convert it once.
Sure. This is a big question, and obviously we're in a kind of time right now. We're not really sure what the future holds for live touring. Hopefully, we'll be back sooner rather than later, obviously. But in an ideal world, where do you see kind of being part of an audio crew of a big touring party? Where do you see the technology going, the kind of the workflows going to make up your lives easier or make the live show better?
I think we kind of touched on a bit that earlier. I mean, I do think that more virtual shows, I think, will happen. I think you'll see more and more of that happening, and I think we should be looking at those things. I think that we've got these small format, lighter PAs, and obviously there are things in the pipeline that are already going down that path. I mean, You know, Benny and I experienced a PA last year. It was a tiny little PA, and we walked in, and I think you might remember this show, Benny, and he went,
Oh yeah,
no way that's going to work. There's only 4 subs aside, and we turned it on, and everybody went, holy blah blah. And so I think, you know, the way forward is to educate people in a way that we don't need to have all this stuff. I think, you know, it's important. I think we can now create almost studio sound. It's good to have a good console, some good control, but in all honesty, there are a lot of amazing systems out there, and that kind of maybe sounds odd that I'm saying what I'm saying, because we obviously just talked a lot about why we did the last Halsey tour with L Acoustics, and the reason is because we needed that versatility of sizes. And I think, you know, if we didn't have to go to such extremes, there are many systems out there that are amazing, compact, and would do a great job, but they don't have yet the versatility. So the point I'm getting to is the future, I think, is much more versatility, much more smaller systems, you know, more virtual stuff going on. You know, I think things have changed now, probably after this for a long, long time. So, you know, we're going to have to be looking at, you know, how we are going to adapt these venues to do these shows and make it work financially. So that's the way I see it going.
I suppose that's going to be an interesting point moving forward as well. If, you know, if rental houses don't have all this mounds and mounds of stock with so many jobs, when things do, and hopefully touch wood, do come back to normality, that there's going to be more gigs than ever. So maybe utilising a sort of small footprint of kit might help going forward.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that's definitely, you know, the way things are going, things getting smaller. And to be honest, I think the front of house position as we know it, I think may disappear.
Yeah, we've had a few people said this recently.
You know, certainly once we get back to work for the foreseeable future, I think it will disappear. And I think this is where more training or skill set required to kind of get people used to that concept. But to be honest, I've done it for years and years on and off. You know, being stuck in a truck, you know, or being stuck in a studio somewhere. It's all doable. It's all possible. And it's not something that hasn't been done before, but it's not something that was commonplace. And I think I see it probably becoming more commonplace. And as you say, I think we're going to end up having to use more installs. It'd be more like a festival kind of vibe. There's a system there. It's already in place. The likes of me and Benny will have to go in and create our, if you like, our soundscape that we want for that particular show. So yeah, I think that's another you know, way forward in the industry as well.
Yeah, and touching on that sort of front of house changing, is like, in the smaller boxes, is obviously money has always been tight, and it's always spend at least as much as possible on you know, things you don't need to. So having a massive PA, having a whole truck or 2 trucks of PA for some of these sort of smaller shows is no longer going to be viable. It's going to be like, what's the least you can have? Like maybe a few extra subs if you're a sub-heavy artist, or having a complimentary thing to these installed PAs.
Yeah.
So that's when versatility comes into its own, because it's like, you know, I might have a few mid-high cabinets that I normally use for front fill, or like a little ground stack supplemental, depending on things. But it's also going to be a lot more organized for that to happen. But I believe that's kind of where we're at, because it's also environmental. It's like, sometimes you have a whole truck of PA and you only use it half the time because there's installs, and it's just wasted diesel. So
yeah. But it is, and I think, you know, a lot of I know obviously there's discussions out there, you know, they're looking at trying to, even in a lot of these big arenas now, looking at installs of you know, the right sort of PA. Now that's obviously going to be a scrambling match between the manufacturers who gets that deal. But I don't think that necessarily needs to be that way, because I think there's enough work for everybody. And to be honest, and I'll come back to it, a lot of all these major top end brands are great. They're really, really good, as long as they're installed right, and the right stuff's put in, and the right control is there, and someone who is with that PA understands how that control works. They're all good. They'll all deliver fantastic results. And to be honest, let's be realistic about it. When you travel around parts of South America, and I've got some pretty major acts, you still don't carry speakers, and you'll get a different line array every day. But because the level I've been working at, that line array comes with well prepped, well teched, so you can make it work. So for the likes of me and Benny walking in, we're not walking into repair assistant, walking and go, okay, today we've got a Mayer rig. Okay, we're going to do this. The next day, we've got a Martin rig. We're going to do this. So it's all totally doable. I just think it comes back to what Benny said. It's like organization. And I think it's forced people into a situation where organization has become more and more important.
Just touching on a point as well, you obviously mentioned the whole either virtual reality gigs, and streaming has been everywhere for the last 6 months because it's the main way that artists can get out to their fans. Now, a lot of people have been saying that when we get to some sense of normality, if we're at limited capacity shows, for instance, artists are going to want to be able to stream that show as well to make sure they're getting, maximum exposure. From an audio standpoint, though, how realistic is that to be doing a regular mix for the audience and to maybe also be producing a broadcast mix? Like, how would you approach that? Would you want to bring someone else in if that was the case? Or
yeah, we have done that in the past. It's kind of interesting what you say about those sorts of things. I mean, usually I'll get quite involved in the broadcast mix, and but obviously if the show is live, I generally have been staying at front of house, and we've got our musical director who will go into the truck and we'll stay with that. But in saying that, I'll leave Benny with the console. I'll go into the truck during rehearsals and run through, and I'll work very closely with the musical director to so that we're all happy with where we want to go. But in saying that, we work very closely as a team in Halsey, and we always have done. So there's a lot of rotating between positions because we trust each other's opinions. It's not always like that on every tour. I've been on those tours where there is a broadcast engineer who will turn up to do what he does. But I guess what you're getting at is it possible that we could mix it all from one console? And the answer to that is yes, and we've done it. We've done it on, I think it was, can't remember, Benny, you might have to remind, was it Good Morning America? Were you there?
No, I wasn't there for that one.
You started just after that, and that was done. That was done from my console, the whole mix. We just sent stems out to a broadcast console, and the broadcast engineer just had to balance the stems up. So again, you're reminding me of what we've done because I'm a bit rusty.
And for, most recorded gigs, Simon, the stems will come off your desk because
that's true.
It's one of those things like. There's a lot of the broadcast engineers are fantastic engineers, often the best engineers in the game because they need to be great and fast.
Yeah.
But no matter how good you are, if you don't know the show, if you don't quite know, again, this vibe, the sound that the artist, the management, the music director is going for, it's going to be impossible for you to nail it. Yeah. And it's all too often that you watch the live recording of a gig that you were at and you go, you're like, God, it sounded so much better at the gig. Just simply, and it's not that the vocals are too loud or vocals are too quiet or the snare sounded bad or whatever. It's just the fact that it just didn't have that vibe. It didn't have that overall hand massaging it. And
coming back to what you were saying, Stuart and Benny, is that how we approach it moving forward. But to be honest, I think we really worked hard, believe it or not, and I think we are ahead of the curve in what we have been achieving over the last couple of years, because we are definitely looking at we've mastered stems. We're sending out what comes off my console, we're sending out, we're mastering it separately within the console, so when it arrives at broadcast, it pretty much it's pretty much a nice straightforward straight up kind of mix for them. But what we do is we always give them freedom. We give them the freedom to work with the vocal, because that's something that sits different in broadcast than it does in a live PA, allowing them having, a few bits and pieces. So, we could send them mastered drum stems, but we might send them a few extra bits and pieces like triggers and things like that, so they can feel like they've got a little mix going on.
And Simon and I both coming from a recording sort of background, is like, I think it's like 32 channels of stems we send off your desk for the Halsey show. it's like drums mix minus triggers. We've got keys mix minus the key base and all these things. So they got like a full patch list, and it's like, take what you want.
Yeah.
And then it's great because often our music director will come sort of running in last minute, like sprint to the truck, start the shop, sprint to the truck, and then he knows where everything, he knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And we did that YouTube show where
that was really quite amazing, actually.
Yeah, and then that was a Digico upstairs in like another part of the venue, and for a full mix, and that was a live thing, wasn't it? I can't remember too much about it, but
yeah. Again, that was, we sent stems out, and I mean, that's obviously the way forward. I mean, obviously people have been doing that, but I think there's been kind of mixed results, and I think that's something that will tighten up and get better and better as well, because it has to.
Other artists I work with, just quickly, will like only send left and right, refuse to give a split, just send left and right, simply because this particular artist is the console's like that, the file is very heavily automated, and there's so much going on, and it's like for a festival slot, it's like it's impossible to get the sound that comes off the console, and because it's EDM, a lot of it's electronic, but there's not so much tuning drums or EQing things. It's more just like side chaining and mixing everything, actually mixing it all together, and it's impossible to do in a 20-minute changeover and sound check, But yeah.
I mean, you do wonder, because I mean, one thing that's come out from the whole streaming conversation is a lot of people saying like, why would I ever watch or pay for a stream when I can go to the show, obviously in regular times? And maybe that's been one of the main things. If you have got this kind of separation of the vibe, like anyone can do it, like a stream of a festival show, and you'll get, like, as you say, Benny, like just a left and right, and you'll at least hear what happened. But if you've got someone who's actually kind of knows the band and is mastering it properly, all of a sudden you can have a live stream that does kind of feel like you're there, because it's, it's the artist and it's kind of recreating the vibe and live environment rather than just a direct L&R.
Yeah. Simon, you might remember, what did we do for that show that was live streamed to Times Square? I think that that was a truck, and that was steamed as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a classic thing where it was a live show, but there was also being streamed to a silent disco type thing, and that it's all those sorts of things that have been in the background. But I think that the current climate is being forceful, like forcing an innovation like that, and it's because it's one of those things. Why would you spend money on it when you're already making the money? Why would you look at it when it's currently fine? We'll do what we can, but now it's like, this is our only chance. This is our only bit of revenue coming in. So all our eggs in one barn basket.
Yeah. And, and I think we've been doing more and more of that, and we've always been experimental in the, particularly in this camp. So, we've always been a bit of new technology to come along, and if we think it's suitable to use and makes life better, we've given it a go. But we've not always just used it for the sake of it, And I think we got to the stage where I think what comes off the console is of broadcast quality. There isn't many people who complain that it's not. They've all gone, oh, that sounds great what you're sending out. A lot of people are nervous, but then when they get what they get, they go, oh, this is actually all right.
Yeah.
So, I like the idea that there's been 10 minutes doing the gates of compression on,
exactly.
How many channels of drums, it's like, the gig's done. And
And this might be the time when, because we're under such weird conditions, it might be the final leap of faith, I suppose, right?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's, I guess, pray for the future, eh?
That's right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. I think that was most of the points I want to go through, guys. Benny, Simon, thanks so much for checking in.
And no, it's great to have a chat, and I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon, no doubt.
Yeah, hopefully face to face at one point, eh? Brilliant. All right, guys, take care.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.